Welcome. I think we have a really good conversation for you on the podcast today. The genesis of this is that Ronan said last week, David Gillick's in on Friday, and I said, okay, brilliant. I haven't spoke to David Gillick in an interview in maybe 10 plus years. Any reason? And no reason. Just have a chat. So that's kind of the impetus behind this, which is just fine by me. And we do underserve athletics generally in Irish media, I think. So it's good to talk to one of our finest. David, as you know, the athlete was elite. 400 metres was his discipline. So 20 years ago now, time flying and all that, at the age of just 22, he was a European indoor gold medal champion in Madrid. It was a huge deal. In sprinting terms, it was Ireland's first gold medal in 70 plus years. And then very impressively, 2 years later in 2007 in Birmingham, he defended that title, another gold medal. So he was a two-time European indoor champion in the 400 metres. He went to the Beijing Games in 2008. And thereafter, things a bit tricky. He was robbed of London 2012, which obviously would have been a great games to go to owing to injury, and pretty much retired the following year, 29, 30 years of age, owing to injury. So it was a tough finish for him, and retirement was tricky, to say the least. But over the last decade or so, he's done a whole host of things. He's been navigating retirement, a new career, becoming freelance, self-employed, father to 3 kids, lots going on. And then I guess more latterly, his TV interviews on RTE with Irish athletes at major championships have resonated with the public in a huge way. They're kind of now a staple of the viewing experience. You watch the race, you want the interview. They tend to go viral. People really respond to them. So a lot going on in the career and times of David Gillick. So we thought, come on in for a chat. So without further ado, here he is. Welcome.
Thanks for having me in.
I was just saying to you off air, you look very healthy. It's disgusting.
Oh, God, I don't know. I'm kind of like...
Tanned. They're not picking him.
People be listening and go, Jesus, what's happening here? No, I'm back running. Like, I enjoy getting outside. Busy house, work for myself, the peaks and troughs. And back running has probably given me a bit of balance. And thankfully, we've had some great weather recently, which... more reason to get out. So,
do you run every day?
I'm probably up to about 5 days, 5 to 6 days a week.
And what mileage would you do a day?
Well, it all depends. Like, roughly speaking, my easy runs now would probably be in and around the hour. So, like, the way without getting too detailed, 5-minute K pace. So 12K. Wow. That would be an easy one. And then depends on few sessions thrown in there as well, interval-based stuff, probably roughly around the hour again. And then the long runs will probably be anywhere from 90 minutes plus.
That's amazing.
So it's hard. It's hard to fit it all in, But when I used to compete, everything was regimented. So I've had to allow myself a little bit of just be a little bit fluid with it. So whenever I can get out,
Yeah. And the interval stuff, does that include sprinting?
Not as kind of. No, not really. Like, you'd be kind of looking at reps of maybe either kind of based on a K or a couple of minute reps where you just push the dial a little bit, but not like it used to be.
Yeah.
I'd wonder. I was up on the track actually recently up there in DSD, Dundrum South, of my running club, and I love the smell of the track, particularly when the weather's good. You get that smell of the tartan or the mondo, and it just brings you back. And I was doing 600 metre reps. So I was going around the track and I was kind of wondering, what I would do now if I hopped into a blocks and the gun went. What would I actually do for a 400? Would I make it? Would be the first question. Would I get around? But I like playing around with stuff. So when it comes to my running now, probably 80% would be easy, light kind of running.
Yeah.
And then you have a little bit of kind of the challenging sessions throughout the week.
Do you still think you'd have much speed? Like, I don't know what the right analogy to use is, but you're 42 now? 41?
I'll be 42, yeah.
So do you think you would, over 200 metres, torch a 25-year-old inter-county GA player?
Oh, is this going somewhere, Joe? Is it?
No. I'd never thought of this question until now, but I would think you still must have some speed, real speed.
I think I would, yeah. I think I would. Do you know what it is? It's probably could I give myself maybe 10 to 50 minutes and come back and do it again? Would probably be a no. I'd probably be good for a one-off.
Yeah.
But I would challenge anyone.
Okay. We'll do it for charity. You versus David Clifford or something.
Oh God.
Because it's it must be like an amazing thing to run at the speed that you used to run at. I'm sure you kind of miss that.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, it's what it is. It's that sort of like freedom of it.
Yeah.
It's instinctive. You're not thinking. There's nothing really going through your head. It's just you just float. And I do miss that sometimes. Even when I'm doing 5Ks, 10Ks, even the marathon, like it's a hard slog. Whereas in sprinting, when the gun goes and you get up to your kind of race pace and you're just floating, say, down the back straight and you kind of hit the bend, all of that stuff is really cool. And before you know it, the race is almost over. And it's that feeling of being really present, but yet it's almost gone through the motions.
Yeah.
And that's probably all the training that you do.
Yeah, you don't even feel it.
You don't even feel it, yeah.
But you kind of think, God, I've been gifted an amazing body here to do all this.
Yeah, and even some of the races. I remember in the Europeans in 2010 in the semi-final, probably one of the best races I've ever ran. And it just felt so easy. And I can remember crossing and looking at the clock and it was like 44:78, my second fastest time ever.
Right.
And I remember just kind of going, oh my God, like if I actually had have pushed it, what would I have ran, And that's just that brilliant feeling that all the work you've put in and then suddenly you just flick the switch and there it is.
Have times dramatically increased in the past, say, 12, 13 years since you've retired?
Yeah, they have. Yeah.
Why is that?
Technology.
The shoe?
The shoe and the track. Okay. So a lot has changed in terms of athletics and probably more so in the last 5 to 6 years it's really ramped up. There was always technology involved in kind of shoes and tracks, but in the last couple of years it's really ramped up.
And if you put the current athletes in your equipment on your tracks, do you think there's been a big quantum leap?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Like if you look at Paris, let's say, in my event, the 400, there was a time when I was competing, 44 seconds would get you top 8 in the world.
44 seconds.
Yeah, so anything under the 45, when I made world final, I ran 44.7, and I can remember even putting a plan in place 2 years in advance of that, and I went through all the previous results, and 44.8 on average was the time for a male 400 metre sprinter to get to a global final, Olympics or Worlds. Now when you look at Paris, it's 43s.
And I'm presuming that's a colossal difference.
It is massive.
Yeah.
0.1, a reference point would be if you think back to Paris with our women's relay team, they were 0.18. Now, if you can remember that race, it was really, really close, but it was 0.18 of a difference between fourth and third. So the difference between getting on the podium, and that was you're talking a metre.
Yeah.
So
if you were still an elite athlete in your peak years, for you to shave a second off your time would be several years' work, and even then, not a guarantee.
Not a guarantee. It's huge numbers.
Okay. So why are they all maybe a second? Why is it gone a second faster, do you think?
I think technology has played a pivotal role. Again, you go back to the shoe technology, and this kind of happened a few years ago.
But because you said you think they're faster anyway, even without the technology.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, I think training and the use of kind of technology in terms of training and monitoring your training, less injuries, all of that has helped.
Right.
Okay. So through evolution, I think there's a push, but is it a second? No.
Right.
I think when you bring in the shoe technology, the technology on the track, and then new techniques in training, the science now is at the cutting edge, nutrition, all of those sort of things. So when you throw them all together, that's probably where a second is coming.
Because I think you're here now, and in retrospect, so European indoor gold in 2005, into Beijing, you miss London with injury and then you have to retire before Rio. But in retrospect, the London Games was a very dirty games.
Yeah, massively.
You were racing during a pretty dirty era, state-sponsored doping over in Russia. God knows what else was going on.
Yeah. I can remember 2009 was probably arguably my best year, and I came sixth, and I was behind LaShawn Merritt won it, Jeremy Warner was second, so two really strong Americans in that era. But the following kind of 6 months later, LaShawn Merritt got done for drugs, and I can remember when that news broke, and I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. And then they're kind of going,
How were you shocked?
Well, see, this is the thing. You're kind of shocked because it was my event. It was so close. you read the doping, scandals, but it was never in my event. It was never someone that I raced against. And that's why I was shocked. But then you start thinking about it, and then you're like, maybe I'm just been stupidly naive here. And that was a real eye opener, because was I fourth? Where did I actually finish? And all of these questions come in. And I think in the subsequent years then, when I went over to America, I was in a training group that, again, there was about 12 in the training group, and 3 of them got done for drugs in subsequent years, Now one had moved out of the group and was it a different coach when that happened, but you still begin to kind of question things. And I always remember, you might remember the ESPN 30 from 30 docs, and Marion Jones. Balco. And Marion Jones lied in a federal court and was proven guilty, so she ended up going to jail. And she was released. And I remember ESPN did a documentary on this, and I was in the States at the time, and this was all what people were talking about. It was aired the following day. We came down to training, and they're all going ballistic on the track. They were all giving out about Marion Jones. She robbed this and she robbed that and she robbed people's money and medals and all this. And I was kind of going, whoa, they're really passionate about it. And then 6 months later to a year later, 3 of them got busted for drugs, and you're kind of like, hang on a second, what is going on? And it was a huge eye opener, and then you question an awful lot of things, you even question going back to when I was in Loughborough and 2012 came around, and lot more investment, as you can imagine, from UK sport, medals and athletics. And we were on the track one day and in the training group, and a conversation sparked about which or who British athlete is going to get the free ride to the gold medal. And I remember going, what are you talking about? And the lads were like, oh, well, anytime there's an Olympic Games on, one of the home athletes always comes out of nowhere and gets a medal. And these are all British athletes. And it was fascinating, because...
They're talking about doping there?
They're talking about doping,
right? As in, so they'll dodge the testers?
Dodge the testers.
No way.
Yeah. So, then they went back and were referencing, some of the Greek athletes when it was in Athens. And, this sort of, and these were just things we were all talking about. But you question. And I think now as well, when you move away from the sport, you question an awful lot. And you question, okay, well, you mentioned systematic doping, Russia and everything that went on there.
Well, that was comical.
That was...
like a Shawshank Redemption tunnel to put fresh urine in with 30 years. I mean, that was just taken it to a comical level, yeah.
But even kind of you're looking at, okay, testing, who's testing their athletes, where are they getting tested, what countries are actually putting money in to test their athletes. And when you actually start going through the breakdown, you'd be surprised at the nations that just aren't investing in that side of it.
And to jump around a bit, when you're in the long line with an RTE microphone after races, and you'll get the Irish athletes, and you're kind of, you're well down the line, so you're hoping someone might stop for you.
Yeah.
You're in that tricky spot whereby you've to trade sometimes a short, friendly-ish interview for access.
Yeah.
And if you get a reputation for, see that guy there with the blue mic? He's going to start asking you about your missed test, by the way. I wouldn't stop for him.
Yeah.
That puts you in a tricky spot as an interviewer. So do I ask the hard question and then nobody stops for me, etc.?
It is a really tricky one, and it's often something that's kind of crossed my mind with, say, some of the athletes who come to that there might be questions or there might be a story. And the reality is that if I'm to ask those questions, they won't talk to you. Oh. Simple as.
And they'll tell their mates not to. He's dangerous.
I've seen it. I've seen it with other journalists, particularly kind of not trackside, down in kind of the bowels of the stadium where there's a lot more journalists, print, social, whatever it is, and they won't talk to them, and you'll get a reputation. And what I've seen of late as well is it's more of the influencers now who have a bit of a profile, who have now gone in there, and it's not even about performances, it's about, where did you get your hair done, where did you get your nails done, and that's where an awful lot of the athletes will actually gravitate towards, because it's the easy one. So it is a little bit difficult, and I'm aware of my position as a reporter, so I have to be a little bit okay, well, a lot of what I'm about is the reaction, is what has just happened, give us your reaction. So I have to think of that, but at sometimes, I would like to kind of find out a little bit more. But what you kind of get as well, and it can be well kind of manned, so they will have an attaché with them, and they'll just chop it.
Yeah.
They'll literally just pull you. And particularly if it's, say, some big name, they will have someone, and you'll only get one question. So what people don't see is that other person in the corner of my eye line and is telling me, wrap it up, out. Or else they'll just literally pull that person.
It's tricky. Yeah.
So it is tricky. And I think, again, it's I suppose my role is a reporter there. You're getting the initial reaction of a performance. At times you would like a little bit more time with them, but it never happens.
No, it's a different discipline. And also it's not like in certain instances you can just be like, hey, here we are on TV. I've no real evidence. I've none in my back pocket. I just sort of, I don't know. Are you on drugs? I mean, what are they going to say?
You'd love to be that blunt and just put it out there.
That's not responsible either. You got to.
No, it's not.
Have work done.
Yeah.
I was just thinking. I said it to you beforehand that the last time I kind of chatted to you like this was about 11 years ago. You were about a year retired. I remember I'd started off the ball about a year. And I don't have strong memories of it. I remember coming away from it thinking, he's putting up quite a brave outlook here on retirement and the job he's in.
What a fraud.
I wasn't sure I bought it. I didn't, and it turned out I was right, I guess. You were in the horrors with retirement then. That would have been 14, I think.
Yeah, 14. So I retired in 2013, about kind of May 2013, and I was in Australia at the time, and it was a combination of everything really. I was struggling with form. My body was breaking down. I first tore my soleus muscle in 2011.
Yeah, that cost you London.
That cost me London because I had a recurrence in 2012, and then I tried to give it another crack. By this stage, it's like funding. I'd lost my funding and sponsors. It was costing me money, to do what I wanted to do. I was in Australia, and then the Achilles went. And I suppose moving to Australia, changing things up again, and almost kind of going, right, this is it. Like this has to work, and then it doesn't. And I think emotionally, I was just completely drained. But I think I did come home, and it was like, just put the brave face on, and like straight into work. I was trying to figure things out, and like you said, I was doing a few interviews, and I'd kind of just toe the party line, and I'd say, this is, it's good, and managing it, and blah, blah, blah. But inside, I was suppressing an awful lot of the emotions and just the frustration and the anger. And the hard part about that was it was the people close to me that would see that. But if I was leaving the house, you put the mask on and you try and just put a brave face, And also, I didn't know how to articulate how I was feeling, and people always talked about the transition from sport into the real world, and I just put it down to that. It's just a transition.
I'll get through it.
One day I'll wake up and it'll all be okay.
I seem to remember probably a self-imposed pressure to earn money now.
Ah, yeah.
I need to get a job.
Yeah.
I need to catch up on all my 30-year-old mates ASAP, because you'd had a business degree.
Yeah, like I'd studied and stuff, and I did a master's over in Loughborough.
But I remember you saying about the job, I think it was sports shoes?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah, I have a memory of you saying, you were like, it can be a bit lonely though. I thought that was the saddest word to use about the job.
Yeah, it was. And that's the thing. I remember I got a phone call from the high performance director at the time, Kevin Ankrum in Athletics Ireland, and they had signed a new deal with this brand. And basically, they were like, look, they're looking for someone in Ireland. It could be an opportunity. And I remember kind of saying to him, like, I don't even have a CV. And he was like, look, come around and we'll sort this out. So went to him, and he helped me put a CV together, like, and that's the thing. Like, I did a business degree and stuff like that, and you'd always go through, like, even leaving cert, like doing a CV, but I had nothing to put on it. Like, this is the thing.
Hobbies, running.
Yeah, and I'm writing it down, going, like, there's nothing here. So he helped me with that, and then the sole thing I looked at the job was how much were they going to pay me.
That's what I think. Well, listen, you and lots of people.
That's all I looked at, and I felt pressure, kind of, even socially. My mates were like 10 years in careers by this stage, and you're kind of starting from scratch again. And I kind of felt as well, like, like I was a runner, but now who am I? So identity, and is that what people thought? Like, oh, he was a runner. Well, what are you doing now?
There's also a heaviness with I'm behind my mates.
Yeah.
That's a treadmill in your mind, I would think.
It is, absolutely. And I think as well, like, you come from sport, and, I tasted success, and I had performed, and So I kind of felt the next phase had to be at that level.
Yeah.
It had to be, or else I was a failure. And then people would talk to me and go, what are you doing now? And I'd feel like I'd have to kind of give some elaborate story about, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And it's all about high performance. And I got obsessed with high performance. I used to go on social media and I'd start following all these high performance gurus and, you know, even sports people who had gone on and done different things and then go, why haven't I? Like, I need to find something. I need to find something. So I jumped at the job solely because of the money. And I quickly realised that like my direct team and boss and everything were over in the UK. So I was here by myself. And it was probably the worst thing I could have done at that time. And I was driving the length and breadth of the country like, you know, I don't mind driving now, but some days I'm thinking, you know, there's no wonder that I'm not overly keen on long drives. Just too much time to think.
Yeah.
Simple, like, you know, and I'd berate myself then. That's where things got really heavy because you start questioning, why did you go to America? If I didn't go to America, maybe I wouldn't have got injured. Then maybe I wouldn't be feeling like this now. So I began to resent athletics, you know, and just didn't want anything to do with it and kind of resented sport in many ways.
That's a long Monday to Friday if it's, okay, I'm in the car with me again.
I used to drive, Joe, like to be like six hours in the car by myself, you know.
No podcast then?
No podcast. No, honest to God, I'm not making this up. I drive in silence.
Oof.
Yeah, honest to God.
You were raw dogging before that was the thing.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
and just the kind of rumination.
Yeah, it was just spiral, kind of out of control, like, you know, and just the constant kind of, it was like the two voices in your head, you know, and one was angry and one was loud, and I wasn't happy, like, you know. I kind of thought things would be a little bit different. I thought if I retired, I'd feel different. You know, there'd be more of a plan in place. I'd be able to look back and be content and happy with what had happened, but I wasn't.
Right.
You know, and again, I think, like, look, been male and didn't really kind of share my emotions, or didn't really know how to articulate my emotions, and this kind of alpha male syndrome of faster, fitter, stronger. You know, whatever you do, don't show any vulnerability or anything, you know. And I think sport can do that to you. Probably one of the key things that I really struggled with was the purpose, you know, of what do I do now?
Yeah, well, I'm distributing shoes.
Yeah.
It's hard to compare to winning a European gold medal. Just is,
Like, I can remember walking into a store and like, obviously you're dealing with people who are keen into running and stuff like that. So I walked into a shop and a fella came straight over to me and he was like, David Gillick. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, I work for so-and-so. And he's like, but you ran 44 seconds. What are you doing?
Really?
Yeah. And I remember just taken aback by it, like, and, you know, it just kind of hit me, like, you know. And I was like, is that what people think of me, like? You know? And look, he didn't mean any harm, but I think he was just a little bit, oh, Jesus, what are you doing here? Like, and I can remember another time, you know, I did MasterChef, and again, another account was like, we'd love to do something in store, and you know, it'd be great, like, with your MasterChef, maybe you come down and maybe cook up something. So I remember a wet Tuesday night down in the far side of Limerick, and in a sports shop, flipping pancakes on a Tuesday, you know, lashing rain, maybe 20 people, 25 people, in the car, and drove 2.5 hours home.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time to think.
Yeah. And how did you get out of all that fog then? It took a couple of years, didn't it?
Yeah, like I said, I retired in 2013, and then I remember my first counselling session was like January 2016.
Oh.
Yeah.
Took your time getting there.
Took a long time, yeah.
What prompted that counselling session?
We were expecting baby number one.
Right.
Yeah. So myself and Charlotte got married in 2014, and then Oscar was in the oven, let's say, late 2015. And you mentioned kind of Monday to Friday, like, it was a firefight on Monday and Friday. Like, Monday to Friday was just, like, it was the pits. And then Saturday I was kind of all right, and then Sunday, dreaded Mondays. Absolutely dreaded. So Sunday was a dark day. And then in late 2015, Charlotte was pregnant, like 8 months pregnant, heavily pregnant. And I can remember just having a bit of a, I suppose now you kind of term it like a panic attack, but it was just pure frustration and anger, and just, I was ranting and raving, and, yeah, it was probably a panic attack. It just the world just seemed to kind of cave in, and that's when, like, Charlotte was at the kitchen table, like heavily pregnant, in floods of tears, and that's when it just hit me, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, how am I going to bring a baby into this world and be a good parent? I need to help myself, and how am I going to be a good husband and dad and all the rest of it? So that's when, like, I reached out. That's when I made a phone call to, I won't mention him, but it was someone who had a kind of similar journey, and I was at a talk and he spoke, and I remember just sitting there kind of going like, oh my God, like everything he's saying resonates. And I obviously knew him, so I rang him, and he just, come on down for a cup of tea, like.
Richie Sadler. Yeah. I'd say every sportsman goes, who do I call here? Who will get it?
Yeah. And it was Richie, and I've known Richie, like, he's from Ballantyre. He went to St. Benilda's a couple of years ahead of me in school, and I remember him talking, and like, it was funny because, like, I knew him, and I saw him in my area, and I'd see him in, like, say, the local pub and stuff, and I just never thought that was going on. So when he spoke, I was like, it just hit me, and I rang him, and I remember what he said, and it was kind of something similar that you said there, like, you didn't buy it. Like, Richie always said to me, even after that talk that he gave, we were chatting, and then I obviously walked away, and he said to me, he goes, oh, I remember thinking to myself as you walked away, I wonder how he's going to cope, but he was great, and just gave me advice and normalised it in many ways. And off the back of that, then in January 2016, I started going to counselling, and extremely beneficial. I still go. Yeah.
Would Charlotte have known through 14 and 15?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This wasn't a one-off rant in a kitchen, her going, where's this come from? She
No,
knew. Yeah, okay.
no. Like, it was...
Because you're a very jovial person publicly, but she obviously saw the real.
Yeah. Like, you'd come home and, like literally the mask would come off and it would just all pour out, you know what I mean? And I'd be ranting and raving and
I can't imagine you ranting and raving, genuinely.
Jesus, I don't know.
Yeah, right, okay. Why'd you like, fuck this job?
Yeah, I just like, I hated myself.
Oh,
that was it. I did, yeah.
Why?
Look, I resented the decisions. I kept beating myself up about, like, why did you go to America? Why did you get on that flight?
But like, so what, you went to America, that's where you injured your...
That's when I first got injured, yeah.
That's a very irrational thing to hold yourself over a barrel, isn't it? It's not that big a mistake. I went to America and ran.
Yeah, but this is the mindset. This is where my head was at, you know.
You definitely weren't in a rational place.
No, not at all. And a lot of the thoughts and the voices in my head were all irrational. Like, there was just, I couldn't, there was no logic to anything. I'd fly, like, I remember one day I said, right, I'm gonna go for a cycle. And I didn't cycle, but I had a bike. I'm going to go for a cycle. And this is how volatile and how fragile things were. But I couldn't find a pair of sunglasses.
Okay.
And that was it.
Erupted.
Yeah. And for Charlotte, that's very difficult. Like, the person who she knows who's out of character, and, you're trying to help them, but yet I just keep telling her, go away,
Yeah, the mind is funny. I got bad road rage during COVID. You don't need to be Freud to figure out what was going on, you know what I mean? But I just did. I was like, it comes out. So the sunglasses is this thing. And then the self-loathing, and God, I'm a grown adult. Why am I behaving this way?
Yeah.
That's the self-hatred.
Exactly that, and you're kind of, and you're constantly arguing with yourself, going like, oh no, everything's okay, and then the voice will come back in, and I'm just constant, like, I couldn't sleep either, constantly tired, and then, like, as a result of that, you're always tired. You're not up for doing anything. I didn't want to go out. Didn't want to go out with friends. I was sick of the questions. What are you up to now, Gillick?
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. Did you quit that job around then?
Yeah, I did that for a year.
Right.
Yeah, and then a new job, and kind of same scenario. Again, you kind of go, it's the job. The job will fix everything. And I think what I was doing as well was, from working Monday to Friday, and then other opportunities might come off the back of, say, sport, or the back of even MasterChef, and I'd say yes to everything because I was searching for that one thing. I hadn't accepted where I was at, so I was searching for one thing that was just going to fix everything.
Okay.
And like, the grass was always greener as well. Oh, dude, but that could be better. And I just ran myself into the ground, like,
And did the counselling unearth some kind of underlying issues and helpful in that way, or just was the act of getting it off your chest the main?
No,
aspect?
kind of what amazed me, like, it was like kind of peeling back the layers of the onion, like going back to things as I was a kid, the way I felt, the way I acted, maybe there was something like an event that kind of impacted me, and kind of you begin to make sense. Oh, maybe that's why I feel like this a little bit, you
Okay.
know. So, and that's the thing about, you know, professional counselling. Like, they kind of press the buttons a little bit and allow you to talk, and almost through talking you begin to make sense of things a little bit. And like a lot of, I suppose, the situation I was in, a lot of it came from retiring from sport,
Yeah.
you know, abruptly, and then the impact that had, and also kind of like the decisions I made. That was the hard part. I kept going back to the decisions. Why did I do that? Who did I do that for? You know, and probably maybe not backing myself and not trusting my own gut feeling. But listening to too many people and trying to please other people. So all of these things were coming out, you know.
Yeah. Have you been seeing the same therapist all
Yeah.
these years? Go away. Wow.
Yeah,
It's a long time.
It is a long time. Now, in fairness, like I'd gone through probably, I'd say he was the fifth person.
Right.
You know, and that's something Richie said to me. He goes, look, you know, he gave me a few names. He goes, you're not going to get along with all these people, but keep trying, keep going. And that's exactly what happened.
And would you ever turn up to him now and be like, got not much going on?
Yeah.
I got nothing for you.
I've done that plenty.
That'll be €150. Thanks, mate.
He's just rubbing his hands.
But you keep going.
I keep going, and that has happened. Some days I'm going in thinking, I feel grand. I don't really need to do this today. And I'd sit down, and then lo and behold, something would
Okay.
come out, you know.
Yeah, interesting. Do you think you'll keep doing that for into the indefinite future?
I do, yeah, I do, and I kind of look at the physical side of it now, going for a run and stuff like that, and I get great kind of like clarity when I go for a run, and just great balance and a bit of time to myself and stuff like that. But that's all the physical side, you know. So me going and talking to someone, I find is like, you know, mentally very important, and even just kind of the tribulations of life as a parent with 3 kids.
Sure,
you know, working for myself, all of that stuff has peaks and troughs, and I think it's a great way of just kind of, you know, sharing your thoughts and sharing your feelings, and almost you muddle through them yourself. And in many ways, through talking, you actually answer your own questions.
Of course you do, yeah.
You know,
it's the opposite of sitting in that car for 6 hours, getting nowhere.
Getting nowhere, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So now you said you work for yourself. So the RTE work is a big part of what people know you for. I see you like at times as a brand ambassador.
Yeah.
I suspect you're probably in the corporate sector doing wellness stuff. Is that like steady? Or are there months where you're like, Charlotte, I'm really sorry. This is it's a disaster. I've got nothing. Why could that? That strikes me as a very media, corporate work, brands, social media. That strikes me as volatile.
Yeah. The life of a freelancer.
Yeah.
You know? And I would have really struggled with that at the start.
Yeah.
You know, because I would have always been very routine based structure. I loved having security. And even in the world of sport, like I would have been very kind of frugal with any sort of money that I would have made. I would have been like, you know, I don't know what's going to happen next year. Like a lot of my kind of, I suppose, endorsements back then were very much kind of 1-year deals. You know, off the back of coming 6th in the Worlds was my first kind of multi-year contract, you know, so you had to get to that level to have an element of security. And then it was all gone, obviously, when I retired. So, and that's probably kind of the knee-jerk reaction to, right, I'll take a job. I wanted security. I also wanted a title. Some people said, what do you do? I had something.
Sure.
But when I started working for myself, like I realised I needed a bit of time out. You know, and Oscar was born in February 2016, and I just felt like I'm at capacity. Like I'm not in a good place. I don't feel good about myself. I'm not happy. So I'm going to take a bit of time out. And I had 1 or 2 little kind of gigs to kind of tie me over. And one thing led to another, and kind of a few more opportunities came my way. And then I kind of realised, well, I could probably make this work. But then you'd have maybe a month where not a whole lot's coming in, and you're thinking,
I'm finished.
I need a proper job here. But I've probably adapted to the peaks and the troughs, and I now kind of I'm well able to forecast when things are going to be busy and when things kind of quieten down. So when I'm on, and when I'm off, I try and be off and use that time wisely. But it can be like, you know, look, with a family and everything that comes with that. There is parts of me would like a little bit more security, but I have the freedom to do what I want to do right now, and I'm enjoying that. Right. And like I've built good relationships with brands, and you know that's been solid for me. And then the media side has kind of come to the fore a little bit more in recent times, and the corporate side now, which is I do a lot of corporate talks in and around kind of well-being, wellness, but now I'm kind of hosting a little bit and doing panels and stuff like that. And I think the Olympics has been great for that. So it's a very much mixed bag, but I like, there's elements I like, and then there's like, if I could just have a little bit more security. But I like the adrenaline buzz that I get from it, and you know, it keeps you on your toes. And I think as a freelancer, like, you're forced to kind of, you know, keep busy, keep working. How can you reinvent yourself? And just keeps you hungry, like.
Yeah, I guess you've no choice. The interviews in RTE are incredibly well received. People love them.
Yeah.
Why do you think they're so emotive?
Yeah, like, sometimes when people say like "well done," I get a little bit like, I'm just doing my job, like,
Yeah.
you know.
And sometimes, and by the way, this isn't meant in a disrespectful way, sometimes you'll just say, how do you feel after that? And they'll be like, oh my God, David. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, so, but they're it's like they're ready to go.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I can just, from my own perspective, like when I was coming through the mix zone back in the day.
Yeah.
And for people who might be listening, kind of like, maybe what's a mix zone? It's the mixed media zone, okay? And it's the only exit point in a stadium. You have to walk through that. Win, lose or draw, you're walking through the mix zone. And it can be it's a strange place because you've just competed.
Yeah.
You know, one, you're knackered. Two, you're trying to kind of comprehend what has just happened, win, lose or draw. And then you've got somebody asking you questions. And I think when I was coming through at times, you're not going to you don't even know who's going to talk to you. You don't know who's in the mix zone. So you walk up and there's somebody. And I think the difference now is that when they come through, there's a familiar face.
Yes.
There's someone from their sport, someone that maybe they know a little bit about, they know who has competed at a certain level, and can empathise. And I think straight away there's a bit of common ground, there's a bit of mutual respect, and there's empathy. And I think that's where I think people then kind of just feel relaxed, and maybe we get a little bit more out of them in terms of an interview.
And I think that is the right approach for that particular type of interview.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, sitting down for an hour, you can tease things out. You can go, well, your tactics off there. But I'm not sure when someone's breathless and they've just finished fourth. Your first question, you know, football interviews are quite antagonistic. It's half of the game. Whereas you're like, this is your slot on, you tell us.
Yeah.
As opposed to grilling them.
And that's exactly it. And it kind of goes back to what we were previously saying. Like, my role there is a reporter to get that reaction.
Yeah.
You know, it's not to critique them. It's not to analyse their performance. Studio can do that.
Right, yeah.
But I think in those moments, it's like, how are you feeling?
Yeah.
You know?
That's quite a nice job to have.
It is, yeah.
That for me, that's nicer than sitting in a studio high and mighty saying, wow, they got that wrong.
And I was given the choice. They were kind of, David, what do you want to do? Do you want to do a bit of co-comment? Do you want to do a bit of studio? Do you want to be post-race? And I chose post-race. And like, don't get me wrong, if I was in studio, I'd probably get more airtime, more FaceTime. But it's not where my passion is. Like, I love to be there. I love to be in the stadium, you know, engage with the great athletes that we have. And like right now, we're in a phenomenal kind of era of talent coming through. And like, credit to the athletes, because they're the ones who are sharing it all. And I think it's sometimes I might forget that the camera's there, you know, and just like, it's the human side of it. And I think what's really good is that they're willing to show the raw emotion of it. And I think that's what really resonates with people back home.
Yeah, no, it's true. And like, there's the drama to it, because they're still getting their breath back.
Oh, no.
You know, it all just adds to, there's an urgency, and it's just so real, I think. Like, because Shane Lowry at the Masters last month, he went off, and when he's like, I can't talk to you 5 minutes after being on the 18th. I've just bogeyed it. Fuck off. He's like, I'm taking a half hour. Whereas obviously it's not a luxury for those athletes. They just get it. Like,
that's the thing, yeah.
Rashida's disappointment after not getting a medal was so palpable.
Oh, God, yeah. And even I was nervous for that. Like, again, I'm a fan of the sport. I love watching athletics, and I think when you're in the stadium, it's such a brilliant live event.
Yeah.
But on that one, like you mentioned about, like, you know, you're zigzagging, like we're way up the back, you know, and in that case we were position 40, and there was 39 people ahead of us.
Had she stopped from any?
So what happened on this one was we were position 40 and BBC were position 19. So the worry was that, oh, she's going to medal and BBC will get the interview before us. We can't have that. So there was a bookable position at position 18, which meant, okay, we could book that solely for that race.
So you use my taxpayer money to book position 18.
Here we go. I'm going to get in trouble now, am I? So we got position 18, and agreed with BBC that if she comes up, we'll get her first and then hand over, and they were cool with that.
Don't you dare!
Yeah,
Don't
and
you
it was
dare.
actually Sarah Mulcairns from Athenry.
Ah, yeah. Well, she's fantastic.
So she
great empathy as well. All
absolutely
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So Sarah was brilliant. I said, yeah, no problem at all. So then I'm in a new position, which was a manned position. So this is Olympic Broadcasting Services, who have their own static microphone and they have their own camera person. So I'm parachuted in, and then lo and behold, the race runs its course. And then before I knew it, Rashida's right in front of me. And just prior to that, Rashida's tall. And I kind of turned to the producer there and I was like, will this microphone pick her up? And they were like, yeah, it'll pick her up. She came up. Now I had my own microphone and she had a static microphone on a stand, and she starts talking, and then lo and behold, I get someone pushing my elbow in because the mic never picked her up. So I'm trying to, have an interview with someone who has just come forth in the Olympic Games, and I can see it in her eyes. I can see she doesn't know what to say. She's completely lost in that moment. And then the mic's not working. Panic, But
because there's an art as well. You got to read people very quickly. Is this question short, sharp, or between an answer, she needs a minute? And I'm just going to have to keep talking.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying much here, but you're great and did this and blah, 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 blah. And people might think, why is Gillick still talking? It's because I need to fill for her for a second. There's all of these things going on. Yeah.
I actually thought in that moment that she was just going to walk. I thought she was just going to walk on. I think she, that was my worry. And I felt for her, I really did, because I could see it. And, you watch body language. So the minute she crossed the line, you kind of know how they're feeling. And this is something that probably you don't see on TV, and that will then kind of, I suppose, help dictate my own question and then when they're coming up. But yeah, I had to fill that void,
Okay.
And then, she was brilliant though. She came around and then she spoke. And then I obviously finished up that interview and went back to my position 40. And then because of the mic situation, we needed to do it. We said we'd do it again. So then she came back around after doing numerous more interviews, came up to me, position 40 now. And I was like, Rashida, we have to do it again. Is that okay? And in fairness to her, she said, yeah, absolutely no problem.
Wow.
And she didn't need to do that. Again, she was finished fourth in the Olympic Games.
Yeah.
Her whole world probably crashed in that moment,
Could you, so she's going to be 25 at the next Games. Obviously, at a glance, without your expertise, we could look at, finish fourth, age 21, it will follow that, in 4 years' time. Could you weigh up the likelihood of her medaling in LA, or if things continue on a kind of predicted trajectory?
Yeah, look, it's very hard. It's very hard to go, bang, she's going to medal. I think she's got all the talent and all the attributes to do so, but an Olympic cycle's so long. It's 4 years. It's a career in many ways. So I think if everything went really well and there's improvements year on year, she'll definitely be in the mix. But the problem is her event is very tough and talent just keeps getting churned out every year. And straight away, even already this year, you're seeing some phenomenal times over one lap. So it's highly competitive. And I think if you're not improving each year, then it might become a bit of a struggle. Okay. So there's always that pressure. And I think for Rashida, she's changed a lot over the last couple of years. She's in a good environment, a good group. She loves her coach. She loves her training group. This year will be a big year for her because I think, if I'm honest, I would have loved her to run indoors, to go to the World Indoors and get a global medal. And I think mentally for her, maybe that would have relieved a little bit of that pressure of kind of getting a global medal.
That was in March. Why didn't she?
I think her and her coach decided one area that they're really kind of working on was her speed endurance. Okay. So that would be the last 50, the last 30 of a 400 metres. And
to my untrained eye, she does lose her form a bit in the last 50. Yeah. That's fatigue, tiredness.
It's fatigue dramatically, And I think, with 100 metres to go, say in Paris, you could see things beginning to go left and right, a lot of wasted energy. Ideally, what you want is things going linear, straight down the track. And that would be speed endurance. But you got to remember, Rashida's coming from a speed base from a 100, 200. So that will take a bit of time. And that's kind of what you'd expect. You would hope that maybe she could hold it just a little bit longer and be in the mix come the line. But this year they decided, okay, you know what, we've a longer year. So the Worlds are in September. We can afford to put a bit more time into the long, hard, grafty stuff. And that's what she did. And I think, she ran a 600 metres indoors, again. So they're working on that speed endurance, the over distance work. And I think they just kind of looked at, let's use this, because if we use this year as really a good solid base year, well, then that might put the groundwork in for the next couple of years leading into LA.
Seems logical.
It's very logical, yeah, it is. And even there, she ran a 200, opened her season, and she came through really strong. And she kind of said, that's what they've been working on. Her block work, usually she's one of the quickest out of blocks. She said she wasn't, but that's okay, because we've been working on, say, the latter half of 400.
So I guess we'll see the real litmus test in Tokyo and the Worlds in September.
That's it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And in fairness to her, she was over in China there helping the relays qualify. So we've a mixed relay qualified 4x4 and a women's 4x4 qualified as well. So that's fantastic. And but it's all about the Worlds. It's all about Tokyo.
You'll be there with RT, I presume.
Yeah, we're covering it. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's so popular at the Worlds, the Europeans, the Olympics, the extent to which that popularity can't be harnessed into, and we're guilty of it here, by the way. We didn't talk about the Diamond League appearance she had in Shanghai, didn't talk about the indoors all that much. The World Athletics relays, they're reported on, but we didn't. It's the country's not kind of engrossed, but the big events we're all in.
Yeah,
I'd say you'd love if there was a bit more of a consistent medium.
Definitely, yeah. And that's the challenge of the sport, and I think, because it's such a global sport, time zones come into it. It just gets a little bit lost.
Yeah, it was great. Paris, the whole country sat down prime time. Yeah,
and I really saw that in Munich in 2022. That was the first time that suddenly, when I came back, everyone was talking about athletics, and there was a number of things in that. One, the time zone. So people are turning it on at an hour that suits. So everybody's watching it. I also think that there was a shift in terms of the Irish sporting calendar. So there wasn't a whole lot of GAA in August, and I think the only show in town then became athletics. And I think that kind of happened again last year as well. So I think, you're always competing as a minority sport to get the airtime and get the coverage. And I think we've been lucky in the last couple of years that August tends to be a bit of time when athletics can really kind of power through.
People I have a barber who only talks about Man United. So it's all we talk about. And I swear to God, there was one day and he was like, "Oh, I just love it. Inga Britson tonight. I can't."
Oh, no way.
I was like, "What are you doing? What's happening there?"
It's crazy. I was getting stopped on the street that I live, and people are all talking about, international names, and they knew all the Irish, by first name, like Rashida, Charlene, Sophie, as if they're friends.
They sort of look like rock stars when they come out. The entrance they do for the relay.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
They're just cool.
Yeah, they are. And I think what's great as well, they're well able to talk, and even social media has kind of really played a role in that. They can share their stories. They're creating a following.
Your interviews go viral, that's a thing, So that all helps.
It does all help, yeah. And one of the things that I tried to kind of really do in Paris in particular was get the international kind of athletes as well, because when I grew up, you tended to switch to BBC to get the international interviews. Whereas maybe we just focused on the Irish, and if there was no Irish in the event, well, then we wouldn't kind of essentially cover it in many ways. So even the likes of Femke Ball and Noah Lyles and all these sort of superstars of the sport, that's what you want to kind of get across. So the next generation, my lad Oscar loves Femke Ball, oh, Daddy's interviewing Femke Ball, and that's great,
Yeah, we shouldn't be parochial and
no,
just watch Irish, because it's a great, the BBC would traditionally have done it felt like a more global coverage. Yeah. So I guess it's good that you can lean into that. I wanted to ask you, Michael Johnson's Grand Slam track business.
Yeah.
So we talked with Carl Denny about this last year.
Yeah.
He's these 4 big events, big money events. He's signed some big names, and his argument is, to our following on from our conversation, he said people say the reason they love the Olympics are the stakes are so big, and so we're going to create. But the stakes in this instance is money.
Yeah, it's money. Yeah.
Now I don't get that excited if some dude wins money, but he thinks that's going to really land. I've seen it make no great impact thus far, Grand Slam track. Is this going to flourish, or you're not so sure?
It's a really interesting one, because I can understand his logic behind it. And, I think throwing 100 grand So basically, you run 2 events, and it's kind of if you get the most points out of those, you win 100 grand. So it is substantial money for athletics and the athlete in particular. And I think that's where he's trying to make it that it's something that the athletes want to compete, because one of the issues athletics has over the last couple of years is that our big athletes aren't competing that often.
Yeah.
And there's not many head-to-heads. So that's where this kind of Grand Slam thing, right, the best athletes will compete on a regular basis.
Yeah. It's kind of a tennis and golf thing. We'll have 4 biggies across a year, yeah.
It's interesting to see the longevity of it. Like I know it was only recent before it all kicked off that they had a broadcaster, so I'm not sure. There was time when there was no broadcaster involved.
Okay. So they wouldn't have been able to leverage much money for that deal.
No. And then you're kind of going, okay, well, what's the longevity of the money behind it? Because it's expensive. Yeah. And even the next one is in Philadelphia, and it's a 3-day event, and they've cut it to 2 days.
So it's already...
So you're kind of beginning to kind of go, okay, why is that? I would have liked them to put one in Europe. I think the Americans, do they really get behind track and field? When you had the world champs in Oregon, it wasn't... The crowds weren't that big.
All right. I would have thought there's big tradition there. No, the crowds...
No, Oregon now tends to be kind of the hotbed, of US track and field. Now, if you watched any of it, the stadiums are small. They had one in Kingston, Jamaica.
I saw a bit of that one.
Yeah.
It looked a bit small.
It looked, sparse, Performances are good on the track. We've seen some really good performances for this time of year. But again, like you mentioned, Ingebrigtsen, he's not there. Keely Hodgkinson, people like that aren't there. So a lot of the Caribbean, a lot of the American athletes are competing. A few Irish, Andrew Coscoran ran very well and got a good payday out of it. He got 50 grand US dollars. So that's huge money.
It's not going to stop the world.
Exactly.
Premier League footballer has that down the back of the couch.
Yeah.
Did you see he won 50 grand last? It's just it's a lot for Michael Johnson to pay out, but it's not going to be like you have to watch this.
No. And that's where I think the general public, the wider sporting public, may not buy into it as much as, say, a global championships. Now, World Athletics are going to counter this.
So this is kind of like a live golf challenge.
100%.
Yeah, okay.
100%. And World Athletics now from next year they're going to have a 2-day kind of essential World Championships, and they're going to take place in Budapest. And it's kind of, they're putting it in Europe because that's where they get good crowds.
Right.
And basically your world ranking will dictate whether you're invited or not. So by having a high world rank, say top 16, you'll get invited. If you're outside of that, you won't. So it's going to force you then to race over the course of the season. And again, big prize money over 2 days. Because we don't have a World Championships every year.
Yeah.
It's every second year. So they're trying to kind of, we need all our top athletes.
Bridge
the gap. Yeah.
And one last one I just wanted to get you on was the scene here in terms of facilities and coaches. Is it terrible?
I think it's improved. I think
from terrible to...
Yeah, look, it wasn't great. When I go back to when I was competing, it was very hit and miss. Facilities, they weren't great. Coaching, we had some really good volunteers, and unfortunately a substantial amount are still volunteers. So when you're going to championships, you're on a start line, you could be lined up against someone who has a full-time team behind them. Whereas when I was there, I was standing on the line thinking, okay, well, my coach is a volunteer, he's got a job in a bank. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you're talking. So there's the non-elite types who go to their local track club ideally, and the coaches are all volunteers there, and that's I'd say that's the world over. But you're talking about then
elite level.
Gillick's good; he can compete in the under-15s. Your coach at that age is very much a volunteer.
But they're volunteers all the way up.
Okay, whereas the Dutch, for instance, they might have a proper academy or a cohort of coaches who look after the next superstar. That's the big difference.
Big difference.
Right.
So funding. So again, you can look at facilities. Yes, we would love more tracks. Every county should have a few tracks.
How many? How are we like on that?
Well, put it this way: in Dunleary Rathdown.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where I'm living. The track that we had was in UCD, and that closed about 2010 or something, was it even? Yeah. And even before that, it was kind of chains across that you couldn't access it. So that was in the whole county of DLR. So you think of the size of that, okay? Only, 2 years ago, Dundrum South Dublin built a track. It's a private track. UCD then put a track the same year. It's about 2 years ago. And we have our first public track in Kilgobbet Park in Cabinteely. And that opened maybe a year ago. So you think of that decade, there was not one track
That the public could just go and
that the public could just use.
see if they liked it. Yeah.
Now, thankfully, things are beginning to change.
Right.
There is more tracks coming online in and around Dublin. But I know Rob Heffernan spoke very passionately about this, that down at Cork, there's a serious lack of tracks. So facilities still are an issue, and access to facilities. But that's one area. And then I think it's the kind of the policy that goes with that kind of pipeline and, you know, nurturing that talent all the way up. And you mentioned the Dutch. The Dutch have a fantastic system in place. Laurent Moulier is a guy, he's a Swiss guy, who operated in Switzerland originally, and then the Dutch got a hold of him, brought him over, and he's put a whole structure around kind of their sprints, so 1 lap, 400 metres, 200 metres, and look at what they're producing. So again, full-time system all around that and services. So we have pockets, we have some good facilities in certain places. Then we have, say, like Abbottstown, which through the Institute of Sport has some really like excellent world-class facility and world-class services. But the one area that's missing out of all that is coaching. So coaching's not full-time. So there is money available to kind of as a bursary to many coaches, but that's not going to fund them full-time.
And who's ensuring that the next David Gillick at 14, who's ensuring that he or she is with a coach of sufficient knowledge?
And there lies probably one of the key problems. You know, we're still very reliant on volunteers. We like, is there somebody that's kind of looking at all the potential talent coming up and going, okay, he needs to move or she needs to go to this coach? Yeah. Who is the lead coach in that event in the country?
Who are the lead coaches? Who judges the lead coaches?
We don't have one in place. So
it's just that volunteer. He worked with Gillick 10 years ago. He's good. Go to him. Or the late great Jerry Kiernan would have been an obvious destination point for people like Kira, but there's no like, we do have now, in fairness, like they do have an endurance lead in the country who is good and has competed at a high level. He's kind of looking after that side of it now, where he like coordinating, okay, the talent coming through, what coaches are available, upskilling the coaches. So that's ongoing, which is a positive. That's not in place for sprinting at the moment. So like there's a bit of a gap there. So we are reliant probably on the high performance kind of director kind of working on that now and putting people in place to, say, you know, lead the relays, for example, and make sure that they're all like everyone's coming together on a regular basis, so we can make sure that we have the best athletes competing together. So there still is a lot of work there. Now, in fairness, there is, like, Athletics Ireland have, like, they increased their membership fees by €3 there about 2 years ago, and ring fenced that money to directly go into coaching and high performance. So to make money available, so people, let's say, if you're coaching an athlete and they're going away on a training camp, that, you know, there's a few quid there that you can go and support that group of athletes, you know. So there still is a bit of work there, and, you know, again, it's just the volunteers. That's what the backbone of the sport is, still volunteers, you know. So, and hoping that they're, and I say this with the utmost respect to them, hoping they're passing on the right information to people with talent, you know, not just volunteers who are like,
I see,
self kind of appointed and like, well, I know about running.
Yeah, and look, you're going to get an element of that, but I think what's important is that, you know, we're trying to bring it all together, because athletics are so many different events, and this is kind of hard. We can talk about soccer, we can talk about like boxing, rowing, where it's generally the same sort of movements,
sure,
you know, whereas when you look at athletics, there's running, jumping, throwing, walking, you know, endurance, sprinting. There's an awful lot, which means you have to bring in an awful lot more people, which unfortunately costs an awful lot more money. And that's one of the key issues that we've had, you know. And also, if you put a sprint kind of lead, you know, it has to be someone that's respected and someone will actually listen to, you know, because someone might go, what does he know? What does she know? I'm going to do my own thing.
Yeah.
And that can happen too in any sport. So there's a bit of work around that, but it has worked quite a lot for the endurance aspect of the sport, and we're seeing good results in that all the way through, from, like, you know, 1500s all the way up to marathons.
Right.
You know, by pulling people together, you know, creating links internationally with different coaches. So if we do have someone coming through who maybe we feel needs to go abroad to get that exposure, well, what are our links with people? And that's why, even like, say, with Rashida over with Coach Flo in Texas, like, that's a phenomenal link to have, and maybe hopefully try and utilise that and build that if we have talented athletes coming through, that the opportunity to go over to, say, University of Texas, get an education and train in essentially a world-class environment could be something that we could harness a little bit more.
Yeah, like a feeder.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Villanova had a great tradition for a couple
Villanova, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Very good. Because I presume there's such an appetite amongst kids who've watched the last couple of years on TV and saying, "Well, sign me up for that," you know. So you want to be able to funnel it.
Well, I'm coaching locally, like, and
Athletics.
Yeah. Well, doing a bit of everything as well, soccer and GA and the rest. But like, we've seen massive interest in athletics, and the wait lists are huge. You know, from young boys and girls, it's fantastic. And you know, for me, athletics is a great base of sport, regardless of where you go with it. But if you can, harness that, there's a lot of talent out there, and it's just trying to put the pipeline in place that we can nurture that talent, keep them in the sport first and foremost. And then, like, you know, it's a great era now. Can we harness that for the future?
Good to catch you up 11 years on. 12 years on since the last time. Have a nice summer and best of luck at the Worlds it's Tokyo, isn't it?
Yeah, back to the Olympic Stadium in Tokyo.
Wow.
Yeah.
September 13th to
late.
21st. Yeah. That's late. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, so that'll be on first thing in the morning over here?
There'll be a bit of that, yeah. So you'll get one session probably live, and then maybe, unless you're an avid fan like yourself, you might stay up, but you might have other things happening. So, look, it'll be good, and it's great that it's on Irish TV once again, and kind of, you know, just keep that momentum building and rolling with Irish athletics.
Very good. Listen, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
No problem.
David Gillick.
Thanks for having me.